Yeah, apologies. It's just getting logged in here. Yeah, I think that works for me. Okay. Good morning and welcome to the Vancouver City Council meeting of Tuesday, June 27th, 2023. This council meeting is being convened by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw. The City of Vancouver electronic meetings, as such, council members and the public may participate in person or by electronic means. If a council member attending by electronic means loses connection during the voting process, team members are available to get you back online quickly while the voting process is suspended. The team members' contact information has been circulated to you. Video of council members speaking, presentations, and vote results will be projected on the live stream when available. Council members are reminded that in accordance with Section 14.13 of the Procedure Bylaw, members must enable their video to confirm quorum. In the case of an emergency, we would need to evacuate the building. I would like to direct your attention to the exits. There are 2 exits beyond the glass doors and to the left. If the glass doors are obstructed, please direct your attention to the 4 exits in this chamber. Please use the stairs, do not use the elevator. I'd also like to highlight that there is a defibrillator located at the end of the hallway outside the council chamber. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of the City of Vancouver's team members who work hard every day to help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Sim is on a leave of absence for civic business. Council Carr. Council Kirby-Young. Council Dominato. Council Bly is on a leave of absence for personal reasons. Council Boyle. Council Fry is in the chair. Council Montague.
Present.
Council Klassen is not present. Council Meisner. Council Joe.
Present.
You have quorum, Acting Mayor Fry.
Thanks, Clerk. Okay, plan for the day. Any comments on agenda items can be sent to the council using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be tweeted out on the @VanCityClerk account. I also want to note City of Vancouver's longstanding commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including the utmost respect for all genders. I remind council that when addressing speakers and the city's team members, we will avoid using gendered honorifics and will instead refer to the person by first and last name, role, or title. Today, we have 3 administrative items. In-camera motion, adoption of minutes, and matters adopted on consent. We have 8 reports, 14 bylaws, 2 administrative motions, notice of council member motions, new business, and inquiries or other matters. So the plan for today, we will break at noon for lunch, followed by an in-camera meeting, return at 4 p.m., continue to deal with the remainder of the agenda, and if needed, break at 5 p.m. for dinner, and return at 6 p.m. to complete the agenda as required. Council will be required to meet in camera later this week. The reasons and authority under the Vancouver Charter are listed in the updated agenda. Would someone like to move a motion to go in camera later this week? Moved by Councillor Dominato, seconded by Councillor Carr. All those in favor say yay. Opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Minutes. Minutes 1 are from the council meeting on June 13th, 2023. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Moved by Councillor Kirby-Young, seconded by Councillor Meisner. All in favor say yay. Opposed say nay. That motion carries unanimously. Minutes 2 are from the special council in-camera meeting on June 13th, 2023. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Somebody like to move the adoption? Moved by Councillor Joe, seconded by Councillor Kirby-Young. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none in opposition, that carries unanimously. Minutes 3 are from the council meeting following the Standing Committee agenda on City Finance and Services meeting of June 14th, 2023. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Moved by Councillor Meisner, seconded by Councillor Joe. All in favor say yay, opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. Minutes 4 are from the public hearing on June 15th, 2023. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Moved by Councillor Kirby-Young, seconded by Councillor Meisner. All in favor, yay. Opposed, nay. That passes unanimously. Okay, all right. Okay, so council will now consider matters adopted on consent. We have reports 1 to 4 and 6 to 8 on the consent agenda for council's consideration. Report 5 is being held to hear from registered speakers. Okay, so does any member wish to hold any of these items for debate? Questions to team members? So I'm hearing presentation number 1.
I'd like to pull item 1.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Kirby-Young. It's based on the queue there. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Fry. I'd like to pull item 1, and then I wonder if you could just repeat, because I think we jumped in quickly on you, what the other consent items are, please.
So, pardon me?
Could you just repeat what the other consent items are, please?
It's 2, 3, 4, and 6, 7, 8.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Boyle.
I just also wanted to hold 1, so I'm good.
Okay, so we are holding report 1. So council may adopt the recommendations for reports 2, 3, 4, and 6, 7, 8.
Procedure first, if I might.
Okay,
My understanding is that the grant reports require 8 counselors, and can we just get clarification that we don't have Councillor Klassen? So
we do not, but we do have Councillor Montague on the line, so.
and is that 8?
According to the clerk, that's enough. I will highlight.
Is that not 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I just wanted to be absolutely sure, because I know our numbers were dropping on and on.
And I will just highlight and remind the clerks that I will be conflicting out on item 5. So hopefully Councillor Klassen will be back in time, or we'll vary the agenda. All right. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, so I believe that was moved, the consent items were moved by Councillor Carr and seconded by Councillor Dominato. Is that how I remember that? Yes. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none. Those items move on consent. All right. Now, I was supposed to ask if anybody wanted to declare a conflict on the consent items. Only I did, that's already being held. Okay. Okay, so the following have been approved on consent. The 2023 Homeless Services Grant, 2023 Dugout Pilot Project Grant, and 2024 Renter Services Grant. The Vancouver Community Sports Event Grants, Summer 2023 intake. The allocation of 2023 Plaza and Parklet Street Cleaning Grants at number 4. Number 6, the funding approval and legal agreement authorization for Cedar Cottage Neighborhood House redevelopment. Number 7, comprehensive rate review, neighborhood energy utility. And number 8, 2023 UBCM resolutions. Reports held for speakers debate questions are below. And we will begin with item number 1. Is that correct? Yeah. So item number 1, the 2024 to 2028 budget outlook. Colin Knight and Patrice Impey at the mic. We have no speakers. This is for information only and held by Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. Patrice Impey, General Manager, Finance, Risk, Supply Chain Management. We are here to talk about the budget outlook. This is the city's, the starting point of the city's budget process. We take a multi-year view looking ahead at what things council and staff will be considering over the next few months as we pull together the 2024 budget. There's no decision at this time. It is just for information, but we are available here for questions. Colin Knight, who's our Director of Citywide FP&A, will do a short presentation, highlight some of the key items from the report. And Apragya Grewal, who is our Associate Director in FP&A, and Sarah Kapoor, who's our Director of Business Unit FP&A, are all here if you have questions. So I'll pass it over to Colin.
Thank you, Patrice. So I'm going to walk through this presentation, which walks through some of the key highlights of the budget outlook as contained in the report. And as Patrice noted, this is for the period 24 to 2028, taking that 5-year view so we can look at some of the opportunities, challenges, and risks that the city faces in its financial outlook. The presentation will be structured as an overview of the budget outlook and how it fits in the budget process. We'll also be doing a walkthrough of the components of the budget, which include the capital budget, the operating budget, and multi-year financial plan, as well as talking about the actions that the city is taking to address some of the 5-year plan financial challenges. Lastly, I'll conclude with an update on the public engagement approach for the 2024 budget. So in terms of the key messages in the outlook, I think, again, to emphasize on what Patrice had said, this is the starting point. So this is something we do each year as part of the process to provide council with the financial landscape and what we're seeing and how city staff will go about building the budget, what that timeline will look like, and some of the things that the city staff will work on as we build the budget and come back to council throughout that process leading up to final budget decisions. And so I think one of the key themes that you'll see coming up throughout this outlook is the challenge that inflation has had on the city's financial picture. And I think that's a challenge that's consistent with what other organizations and residents and businesses are experiencing with the current environment. And for the city, that does have some significant impacts on the city's costs, particularly in areas around staffing costs and construction costs. And we're also continuing to be impacted by that tight labor market and supply chain challenges. What that means is when we look at just the current services that the city offers and projecting into the future, if we don't take further action to address our revenues and expenses in the coming years, what we project is a tax increase of on average 9% each year for the next 5 years. And I'll go into some of the factors that drive that, and then also the actions that the city is taking, recognizing that that's not a sustainable path in terms of increases and the challenges that place on affordability. So we want to highlight the many actions that are being taken that will help address that challenge. We'll talk about capital, and again, one of the key focuses of capital in the organization is around delivery and delivery of projects, and as well on the services side, efficient delivery of service, how to make our services optimized and more efficient, better able to serve our customers, and that has a financial benefit as well. So there's a lot that is being done, and we'll speak as we go through the coming presentation on that sustainable multi-year financial planning framework that the city is embarking on to help address some of these multi-year cost pressures. Also note as well is that the mayor's budget task force, which was created, is underway. And so in terms of the design of this year's process, we're factoring in that the mayor's budget task force will have findings to share in October of this year that will inform this budget and future budgets. And so we're anticipating that will be an input into the process as well. Just a reminder in terms of the city's planning framework, is just to emphasize that as we build the budget and service plans for this year, we're drawing on a number of things that council, direction that council has provided through vision, priorities, goals, multi-year strategies that council has, and the current council has supported in prior councils. And so staff will continue to take that direction which council has given and use it when building the budgets. And so we'll continue that approach this year, drawing on the direction that this current council has provided, starting with the budget that was recently approved in February and working to integrate all those components of council's priorities. So now moving to the walkthrough of the budget outlook, and I'll start with the capital side of the budget. So again, a big challenge here is around inflation and cost escalation. That's something clearly affecting any industry that is looking at construction costs, is seeing sizable increases in construction cost estimates, and that's really impacted the city. And then as well, as you noted, staffing and labor issues around vacancies and just finding skilled staff that can occupy key positions that are needed to deliver on capital projects remains a challenge, and supply chain remains a challenge. And so what the organization is doing is really focusing on how do we deliver, and that in general maybe taking actions to make sure that projects can proceed, and that will have amenities delivered that citizens will be able to see tangibly. And so we're looking at optimizing our processes internally on how things can move more quickly through the system, to make sure that that we're looking at any factors that are causing projects to be delayed, and to make sure that we're taking action to address those. And there will be an update to council in July around some of the significant number of capital projects that are in progress and will be delivered over the coming year and years. This chart here illustrates what the level of capital delivery that the city needs to be able to get to in line with the capital plan that was approved in order to meet critical renewal needs, and also needs around infrastructure, new infrastructure for a growing population in our city. And so it's an imperative for us to make sure that we deliver and find ways to deliver at a level that we haven't historically. And again, that represents just the challenges the city faces around making sure we have that infrastructure in place and the infrastructure is renewed. And so this will be a continued challenge and focus as we build the budget. Moving over to the operating budget, we are looking at, again, as I noted, looking at the 5 years, an average 9% increase per year over that 5-year period, which you can see how that translates into, for example, $116 for a median strata, an increase each year on the average tax bill. And the driver behind that, again, the city's significantly impacted by collective agreements. So as collective agreements are settled, that impacts the city budget. And as we've seen, and this is again within not just the city, but across other public sector and other organizations generally, is that with the high inflation environment comes higher than typical salary increases through collective agreement negotiations. And so the city's budget will be impacted by that, and as well inflation on other non-salary type items, including materials. And so the approach that we've taken again is that we have a contingency in our outlook that will allow us to respond to some of those inflationary pressures. For many of the city's collective agreements are not yet settled for the 2023 to 2025 period. And so again, that will be something that as those agreements become settled will impact the city's budget. And so we're taking an approach of making sure that we've got adequate contingency for those costs. I'll note as well that the budget for 2024 will be impacted by some of the initiatives that council approved in 2023. So for example, the 100 additional police officers, a portion of that cost was built into the 2023 budget. As those staff ramp up and come on board, the full cost impact of those and other initiatives will be part of the 2024 budget. And then we continue to have the additional 1% property tax support, as well as utility rate increases supporting infrastructure renewal. And again, that's critical to addressing the city's infrastructure deficit. For the outlook, we have taken a conservative approach around revenue assumptions, forecasting 3 to 5% growth, which is more in line with historical increases, but I'll note doesn't fully cover the cost increases and some of those fee-covered services that, given the inflation environment, could be higher than that. And so that's something that we'll look at. And I'll speak in the presentation a bit about some of the work that we're doing on revenues. And so as we do work to optimize revenues and look at opportunities for new revenues, that will allow for an increase in revenues, which will then be one of the things that we can look at reducing the property tax impact as we build the budget. So the next few slides, just talking about, again, what drives the city's costs and what results in an average 9% property tax increase estimate when we look at just maintaining current service levels. And again, you can see the factors listed here. I've talked about a few of them around the inflation and cost increases and the infrastructure renewal on capital. I'll just also add that there is a portion of the city's budget that relates to regional utility charges for Metro Vancouver. And so that is something where those are projected also to increase at levels above inflation, and that will impact the city's budget. We're also looking at reserve replenishment given the significant drawdowns of the city's general revenue stabilization reserve that were needed during COVID. And so it will be important to have a multi-year plan to replenish those reserves. And so that's factored in. The biggest driver of the city's operating budget is around salary and benefits costs. And again, those are largely driven by collective agreement patterns. And so that will be a key input into the budget process. We're also impacted by external parties, for example, some like ECOM as an example, or other external parties where the city is required to pay cost increases passed on from those agencies. And then as well, a number of other areas of the city where we've been subject to cost increases, again, above typical inflationary rates, and inflation is higher than it has been. When we look at the projection of the tax rates, again, it rises for the next few years. We do project that it will drop somewhat as inflation moderates more towards 27 and 2028 based on current projections. But again, noting that some of the inflationary factors that are currently impacting the city's budget are expected to continue for a few more years. And that's a key factor in the property tax increases being higher than historically they have been. Well, what I will say as well is that, again, when we look at this picture, what this tells us is that we need to take actions to do things differently and look for efficiencies in how we deliver service, look for new revenue opportunities. And we know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this area. Looking again at the 2024 budget and what's driving the tax projections for next year, again, the largest area would be around this contingency item for inflation and collective agreements. And so that's something that as those agreements settle, we'll get information through the budget on what those amounts are, but we're taking estimates based on inflation forecasts and what we've been seeing as a city and what other jurisdictions have been seeing. And then, so that piece is around 6% of the increase, and then there's 1% for infrastructure renewal, 1% for the annualized cost of council's investments taken through the 2023 budget that had cost implications in the 2024 year, and then implications of 0.5% around Metro Vancouver regional utility charge increases that are funded through property tax. And then, as we note, that there's significant risks in this forecast around what those inflationary pressures end up being, as well as senior government policies. And I'll speak to some of the work that we're doing around senior governments. And then unforeseen events, extreme weather, et cetera, those would be risks which we have reserves that can manage to an extent, but those factors we are not built into the outlook, but we have to look at making sure that we've got our reserve replenishment in place so that we can manage those events. I'll make a point as well around within the current budget, one of the factors that contributes to the pressure on property taxes is a significant portion of funding within the city budget that is goes into service areas which traditionally have been the responsibility of senior levels of government. And this was outlined to council in a memo earlier this year around the budget, around the level of estimated costs associated with some of these services. And again, a significant portion of the budget and a significant pressure on our budget each year is related to some of these service areas. For example, housing and childcare, which the city spends significant amounts of the budget towards. The city is looking at opportunities to pursue senior government funding, and to note as well that there are a number of areas where senior governments have come to the table and brought forward funding, which has been helpful to the city's planning and which is incorporated into our budgets for the coming year. And we will continue to use this funding to advance. I'll just note that the funding, where it is largely one-time and unpredictable, that does present challenges, and it isn't to the level that it fully manages the cost implications to the city budget around these service areas. And so there is an opportunity for us to continue to advocate for ongoing and predictable funding from senior level of governments to help address this challenge. We also recognize that there are significant actions that we as a city can undertake. And so the next section of the presentation is focused on describing some of the many actions that are in progress across the city to drive towards that increased efficiency, better customer service, and identifying new revenue opportunities and advocating for senior government funding. All these opportunities together as we build the budget will, over the coming years, help address that challenge around the tax rate and look to create financial capacity to offset that pressure. So there's three key areas of focus, as I noted: revenue generation, service improvements and capacity building, and senior government funding and partnerships. So first on revenue, that throughout the city, we've been looking at existing and new revenue streams and opportunities to prioritize ones that will generate impacts and deliver revenue in the near term and over the coming years. And so we'll be updating council through the budget on those actions. Some of them are listed here around the types of work that is being undertaken, and some of it will be more short-term impacts, some of it will be longer term. And with these items, as we go through the budget, they will come forward to council in fee reports and so on, around getting direction from council and support to look at options in these areas that could help increase revenues and reduce the impact. Also noting that there'll be discussions with Park Board, following up on Parks Board's direction to explore a think big strategy around revenue generation options within parks. Moving to the service improvement and capacity building actions. Generally speaking, again, there's a number of things that are being undertaken across the city, but they're looking at lean and continuous process improvement, looking at simplifying processes and making sure that we're running things efficiently in the delivery of service, which will maximize value for taxpayers. And also there's a key piece around using technology to help drive that efficiency in the organization. So you can see here, and this is just a sampling of some of the many things that are underway across the city. I'll highlight again in the permitting area, significant number of initiatives around making that process more efficient and using technology, which ultimately helps the financials, because when we can get a process that works well, that serves the customer and is efficient, then that translates into financial efficiency as well. And that means that there's more capacity with the resources that we have to deliver better outcomes. On senior government funding and partnerships, so again, there's the municipal funding framework is work that the city has been advancing through some of the other regional areas like EBCM and FCM, where we need to build this appreciation that municipalities need a modernized toolkit to support the evolving role of local governments. That's more opportunities to be enabled to generate revenues and to access senior government funding to be able to deliver on the needs that municipalities face. Because again, as growth occurs, there's significant need for amenities to support that growth. And so the city is supporting that growth, but also having access to funding that will deliver that those amenities will be crucial in terms of preserving the level of service that the city offers in an affordable way. And yeah, just to continue to address critical infrastructure and community needs, recognizing that some of the critical infrastructure needs, especially in the region, are significant. And so that's an area where government support is crucial to address some of the challenges. And you can see just an example of some of the priorities for 2024 around senior government advocacy. So the last section I'll speak to is around public engagement. So given that we just completed an extensive round of engagement with the 2023 budget that was just passed at the end of February, for the upcoming budget cycle, we'll be looking at a scaled down engagement, but it will include significant opportunity for the public to participate in the budget process. And so that will be happening through August and September of 2023. And some of the examples shown, like through the annual Talk Vancouver budget survey, that there will be an opportunity for residents and businesses to provide input as staff can consider as we're building the budget and council consider as they deliberate on the budget. And so that will be all of that information, including the information that we gathered over the past several months through the 2023 budget, that will all be used to inform how we deliver our services and how we shape our budgets for the upcoming year. So in summary, I think given the significant challenges that the city is facing, a multi-year financial planning approach is important for looking at how we need to change our service delivery to adapt to the challenges we face. And so we'll continue to update council and on the progress of these actions and work towards bringing a budget forward in the fall that incorporates some of the savings and new revenues from these initiatives as we continue to work towards addressing these multi-year financial challenges. The timeline is shown here, and I'll just again note that key next steps will be happening in that fall, September, October period, including the Mayor's Budget Task Force report to be delivered to council. And then the discussions, engagement with council and the public leading up to the December budget vote on for the upcoming year. And so that brings me to the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Colin. Now, this was held by Councillor Kirby-Young, and she's first on the queue with questions for the team at 5 minutes. Oh, sorry, Patrice, did you want to?
I was waiting for questions.
Okay, great. Councillor Kirby-Young.
At the ready. Can I move for a second round right off the bat?
Sure thing. Second round, seconded by Joe. All in favor? Seeing none opposed, that passes. Okay. Councillor Kirby-Young, over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to fire through some of these. Some might be quicker and shorter. I noticed there's reference to new police officers, but not to the council's additional commitment to fulfill the Dark Horse report and hiring of the additional firefighters. So can you confirm if that fulfillment for the extra $3 million is in the budget outlook for the additional 22 firefighters?
So in this presentation, what we're showing is the full year budget for what was approved by council in 2023, but no additional ones going forward. Council would bring those forward.
Why are we showing council's direction on police but not on firefighters? I'm confused.
Council
provided
made the
direction on
decision last year on the police, and we funded a portion of it in one year and a portion of it in the following year. council's decision on firefighters for 2023 was fully funded in 2023. So it's the second part of the 2023 funding for police.
So,
So council would, in the 2024 budget, would add, follow the next year of the firefighters. And assuming there's no additional police. Yeah.
2024 budget, so maybe I'm just a bit confused, because I believe VFRS is as well. So I'm just looking for clarity, because is that not also supposed to happen over a couple of years and multiple years? I'm just not
Sorry, say that again?
I believe there's confusion, and I'm just looking to clarify, and I believe there's confusion with VFRS as well. That was also supposed to happen over a couple of years, similar to police. So I'm just wondering why we reference.
So maybe I'll
additional
clear it. The
resourcing for police, but not
2023
fire.
approved staffing, we only funded part of that in 2023 because they could only staff up so much. And so this is the funding for those 100 officers that were approved. Then VFRS office firefighters that were approved were fully funded in 2023. So council would bring forward additional firefighters in 2024 if that's what they chose to do. So it's really the
are we not-
funding that was split over the 2 years.
Did we not also anticipate that the hiring of the police officers would fall over the 2 years in 2023 and 2024, just based on the staffing timelines pursuant to our conversations with them?
Yes, so half of the funding for the police went in 2023, the other half will be in 2024. On the firefighters, they were fully funded in 2023.
Okay, I'm trying to understand this, but I'm a bit frustrated because I'm burning up my time. But what I'm hearing is that they're both hiring over 2 years, and yet we're only showing one of them and not the other service in the 2024 projection.
I'll confirm.
So with respect to police, police had the approval to hire 100 police officers this year. The partial year funding was a reflection of the fact that they didn't anticipate actually being able to have them all hired this year, but they have approval for 100 officers. The funding for the officers that were approved in this year was all in this year. So there was no carryover additional expenses. So there is no contemplation of any additional net new positions next year. So the delay on police was only a function of the fact that they didn't anticipate spending all the money this year, but the council did give them the approval, the commitment to hire 100 new officers. That's the difference.
Okay, I'm still seeing confused looks around the room. So you're saying police are fully funded this year. We're showing the incremental cost in 2024 of that 100, but the firefighters are not. I still, and I'm really trying to follow this, but I still remain confused, and I see confused looks around the room.
So I didn't. Please,
I'm probably going to have to ask
so
for a third
police were
round on
given
this.
approval to hire 100 new positions. They're not going to have them all on board on January the 1st. So what council did was fund half of the salary costs this year. The additional half will be added to the budget next year. Fire was given approval to hire, I can't recall, 33 positions. They were funded for the full year for the 33 positions from January 1st this year.
But fire is saying that they still have 22 to hire in 2024.
Yes, that's not in the budget.
Why is that not in the budget, since we gave direction for both? Why are we treating the services and the accounting differently is my question.
I think the second year of the firefighters is to fulfill the full ops review, but the direction for 2023 was just for the 2023 year, and then 2024 would be the additional firefighters in the next year.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to loop back on that because that's burned most of. I'm going to have to come back on with other questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Boyle for 5.
Thanks. I had a number of those same questions, so appreciate Councillor Kirby-Young using her time, and happy to do a third round if you need. I know a number of us are just trying to figure out these numbers. So can I just follow up on those questions to confirm that the 9% in this overview includes a fulfillment of that police commitment from last year, but no new police commitment, no new police officers?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's the final funding for the 100 that were approved.
Okay. And similarly includes no new firefighters. So if council wanted to maintain its commitment to fulfilling the Dark Horse report, we would at some point when the budget comes back to us, give direction to staff to add the funding for those 22 firefighters?
Correct.
Do we have a dollar amount for that?
2.7 million.
Okay. And is that the would that be then the full dark horse report?
Yes,
Funded?
that would fulfill it.
I'm just ticking through my questions here. Does the 9% include any new investments, or it's really a fulfillment of 2023 commitments? And
Yes, so this is sort of a current state, steady state, so whatever's been approved, and then how the cost structure is looking going forward, not any new ones that council hasn't already approved.
okay.
Yeah.
And the mental health investment that was made last year, do we have any sense that the province might take that on, or are we in our outlooks assuming that that the city is now indefinitely paying those mental health costs?
The extra days?
The 100, nurses that
Oh,
became mental health
Yes,
workers.
that's reflected throughout the 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there for now, actually. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Councillor Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I asked this question already, but I'm going to ask this question again. So, we know we have 7% inflation last year, and we know we're going to still have a very high inflation this year. So what is our projection for the inflation?
I'll ask Colin to answer how we've incorporated inflation, because it's not just one number.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so in the outlook, there's discussion of sort of the rate assumptions based on what we're seeing generally from CPI, but I think the key thing is that the city's cost base won't necessarily track exactly CPI, so that's one factor that we look at. But especially for the next year, the main drivers will be around in estimates of inflation based on what the city is seeing, and so that could be in collective agreement areas. As I said, that would be based on looking at the information we have around groups that have reached agreements within the city, as well as what's happening regionally. And then for inflation on materials, we'll be working with our procurement group, looking at what market trends, recent procurement trends have been around materials that we purchase. And so that is built in, as I said, like in that chart, this sort of explains the cost increase. We were looking at 5 to 6% in terms of that property tax being driven by inflation expectations for the coming year, but noting that in some areas like construction, it could be far greater than that. That's an average across looking at an estimate based on the information we know now.
Okay, so do we have any projection now or estimation for the inflation for this year? What is that number? Do we have that?
Yeah.
number?
I think are you asking about the conference board, like the external agency forecasts for the
No,
economy
our
generally,
internal
or
one,
for
we
our own?
consider
Yeah.
cost running the city.
So again, I think I could say that we're looking at that property tax impact in the 6% range, and that's based on the factors that I said. And for more details on the factors, for example, around our assumptions around collective agreements, I think that would be information that we could provide to council in camera at a future time.
Okay, so I guess the answer to my question is there's no projection for the inflation at this moment.
I think we have information that we could share with you, but again, given that some of the collective agreements are in progress, then some of that information would be in-camera information.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, thanks. The other question is, I think some of our license fees in Vancouver is significantly lower than other city. So I think in this report, it shows that we're going to project 3% to 5% increase for the license fees. So that's about $1.4 to $1.5 million. So that's actually, still very low compared to other cities' license fees. Any progress on that? I know staff is working on review all the business license.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a couple comments. One, that particular, the 3 to 5% is just based on the incremental assumption around revenue increase. So that's not a statement of like the comparison of what that fee is relative to others. But I think that council did provide direction as part of the last budget in February for us to look at this cost recovery and our fee levels and bring back options for council, including options around cost recovery. And so I think, the licenses area is one of the areas that we're signaling that we will be looking at. And so that can be information that we bring back to council.
Okay,
I'll just add to that, the 1.4 to 1.5 is sort of staff's estimate of incremental revenue if council approved license increases above the 3 to 5, just to be clear.
Okay, so
3
that
to
means-
5 is built in
Yeah.
across all the fees, but of course, they will come to council and you'll have an opportunity to make them higher if you want. And so
Okay,
this
I see.
appendix is just an estimate of what that could be.
yeah. Okay, thanks, Patrice. The other question, so I saw the sponsorship, advertising, naming rights, donation is to be determined. There's no number for that. Do we have any estimation? What is the progress on that?
That is a program that we're working on right now. So
Okay.
staff wasn't comfortable identifying a number, particularly for 2024. But we will, by the time we get to the budget process,
Yeah, okay.
provide you with some estimates there.
Okay, thanks. My last question, so I think you mentioned that in the presentation already, but I just want to clarify so that public is more aware of that. So that 9%, meaning everything status quo, and without new revenues, without cost saving, everything stay the same, and we expect 9%.
Right, I think that's what Colin was kind of outlining with those three pieces. So this is the starting point. If we do nothing, that's what it would be, status quo. But we're obviously working on many things, whether it's revenue or cost recovery or senior government funding, which would all get built into the budget as we go through the next few months. And some of them staff will build in because it's improved assumptions, and others council will make a decision on what they want to include and things like fees, et cetera.
Great, I just want to make sure the public is aware of that because we received some question from the public. Okay, that's all my question. Thanks.
For this round, but
Okay.
next on the queue, Councillor Carr.
Chair. My first question, actually, Patrice, is for Colin. Colin, you mentioned in the presentation that there are reserves to deal with unexpected, significant climate events. But have you done an analysis or looked at the potential projection of severe climate events? And would it mean us increasing the reserve in order to deal with them? There have been some pretty severe ones across Canada and British Columbia and the region this year.
Yes, no, and I think there's definitely work being done to look at how we can better sort of assess those level of risks. I think the comment I would make is even just over the past several years, just based on observation, and we've been reporting back to council the magnitude of kind of what we call extreme weather type events, and it's been consistently for the last couple of years exceeding like historical averages. And so we do have this a storm reserve, and we do have a general revenue stabilization reserve that, again, they can provide some of that cushion to the city if we experience those events. But I think what we observe is that if it's consistently, getting into a large dollar range, then that's one where, we need to start thinking about making sure that we've got more funding built in for reserve replenishment.
Interestingly, just before this meeting started, there was a press conference held on the lawns of City Hall on a new climate adaptation strategy federally. And I note that in your presentations, you're very consistent about saying we need to increase our revenues. Have you had any indication that the federal specifically the federal government, because it's their strategy, is willing to put more money on the table for increasing the resilience and the adaptation, as well as response to increasingly extreme climate events? Are they saying anything about it? Making sure there are funds in place to help municipalities.
Yeah, Patrice, do you want to take that?
At this point, we are looking at multiple programs that the federal government has. We don't have one at this point that we're aware of, but I expect that will be an outcome of some of these discussions. It's something that we continue to flag.
I think that's a
Through
good one
IGR.
that we need to. I noticed that they did talk about floods, but there's a lot more than just floods that we have faced, as you know. Okay, that's good. Third question. I'm thinking more bigger picture here than detailed line items in the information that you're presenting. I am interested in your analysis of what the risks are if we do not sufficiently invest in certain elements of our city's work. And it brings to my mind the fact that we are paying now in this council for a lot more, and it's a lot more stress on our budgets because during the time that Vision was in power, they underspent on the upgrades that are needed for the sewer system replacement. So what are the kinds of risks you're looking at, the sort of big things if we don't invest in? It's going to be penny wise, pound foolish. It's going to cost a lot more down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've highlighted through our capital plan the importance of investing in renewal to address the infrastructure deficit, and I think that's where, and that includes the example of increasing this sewer renewal rates, but there's other areas that includes, and that's again why as part of our outlook we have that 1% additional property tax impact of providing renewal funding to address that. We know we have significant aging infrastructure just based on where Vancouver is and how old we are as a city, and that pressure will only increase, and so it's crucially important that we make sure that we invest in renewing assets before, as they get older, that can be very costly to renew. So we want to make sure that we make progress on that infrastructure deficit.
Apropos of that, one of the things about infrastructure is, of course, we are a ocean city, a seashore city, and rising sea levels are right now being recalculated by scientists. A report came out this week that Arctic sea ice, that's it. In the summer, we're not going to see it anymore, and the rising impacts on. I'm out of time. I'll get back on. I'll let you think about that, but I'll get back on to get answer to the question. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Meisner.
Thanks, Chair Fry. Thanks very much for the presentation. Obviously, an alarming number from my perspective. Gotten a lot of feedback already from residents, very concerned. I just want to elaborate a little bit more and ask some questions on the projections. In terms of the inflation question that Councillor Joe was asking, I wasn't quite clear. Are we what if we have a recession, for example, inflation goes down to a very low level? Are we running different scenarios with the budget to see what those various outcomes might be over the next 4 years?
Yeah, so I think we will be considering different scenarios around economic forecasts, and as I said, we are projecting in those future years, 5 years out, we are projecting that some of those inflationary pressures will moderate. I think the point though with the city's costs is, again, given that a sizable amount will be related to contracts that we sign now or collective agreements that we sign now that will last for several years. I think that what that means is that even if there is a change in the inflation outlook, it will take a year or two before that fully translates into cost impacts on the city side.
Okay. I wanted to talk about parking revenue. I noticed that highlighted. Do you have a sense of how much it's down this year so far? Because I was under the understanding that it had bounced back quite a bit.
Yeah, we do monitor that regularly, and I think that it had bounced back significantly, but even still was right now our budget for this year is around it just returning to 2023 2019 pre-COVID levels. So just getting back to the pre-COVID levels, but not growing to a level above that, which is what we would need to keep those revenues in line with just, again, the inflation changes over that time period. I think just to note that there are some factors around the locations of where that have been challenged in terms of revenue changes, and I think the downtown area and the shift in work patterns has been a factor that seems to be persisting beyond just a simple bounce back scenario, and so that is impacting us. So it's a risk to monitor, but we are also acknowledging that there's work to be done around looking at opportunities on parking revenue. So there are opportunities, and that work will inform the budget discussions.
Okay, good to know. And the rec fees as well. I understand that that's down as well. Is that correct? In 2023 so far?
Yes, that was something as well we're monitoring, is the rec fees haven't fully got back to the level of pre-COVID, although they're
How
getting
close are we?
closer.
How close are we?
I think, we're budgeting for them to be in that sort of 90 to 100% range of the pre-COVID level, but recognizing costs have increased significantly over that time period.
Okay. The other question was around the task force recommendations coming in December, but then the budget vote potentially in December. And that to me just seems like a really quick time to pivot. Let's say there's, some great recommendations from the budget task force, but we're being expected to, I guess on your end, redo the budget and pass it. Is that a workable timeline from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think we'll have to assess like what the recommendations are from the task force, and then I think our approach would be is that wherever there are ones that can be quickly implemented, that we would, and then perhaps if there's some that are more of a multi-year implementation, that we would structure it to align to what the task force is recommending, and so that would be the approach that we would take, and again emphasizing that like with the our budget policy has been around, with the exception of the election year like last year, to make sure that we are aiming for that December approval, because that is what enables the city to deliver and proceed with work, is to have that budget clarity for
But
December.
we could take more time if necessary.
Yeah. Maybe just a correction. We are expecting the budget task force information in October.
Okay, great.
So that we do have that month, and we do have an extra date for council as a backup date. So I think we're planning to bring it to council first end of November. If we needed to delay that, we could. We've got an extra date in there. So hopefully there's enough time there to make some of those adjustments.
Okay, that's encouraging to hear. It's not December,
Yeah.
October. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Meisner. Next on the queue, Councillor Montague.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to circle back. Hopefully, I'll be quick here. Circle back to the cost of public safety. There's no doubt policing is expensive, and we're reminded of that pretty regularly. But Vancouver is also a core city, and while we have a population of about 700,000, the VPD police a population about twice that as a result of being a core city. So I'll use protests that happen in the city as an example. I think the VPD there's something like well over 400 protests in the city of Vancouver last year. Most of these have nothing to do with the city of Vancouver, but the residents and businesses are on the hook for the costs. So my question is, what conversations, in the presentation you talked about conversations with other levels of government. So my question is, what conversations have been happening with both the province and the federal government to assist with policing costs, especially costs related to policing issues that are specifically connected to the provincial and federal government responsibilities?
We have highlighted over the years the impact of the city being a regional center in a metropolitan area, which is a little bit different from, say, Toronto or Winnipeg or Calgary, that are larger municipalities. At this point in time, I don't think we have a particular advocacy that we're doing, but that has been highlighted several times over the years. And as you know, with all the extra activities and the events and things, we don't get really any of the benefit from an economic point of view at the city. It's really the city at large. Another thing just to point out, though, is we do have a larger percentage of our property tax revenue coming from commercial than other cities may. So we have a large commercial tax base, which does benefit from some of the activities. But things like protests are a
Right.
different one, and that one, no, we have not specifically requested that, and I'm not sure if VPD has, but I can check on that.
Okay, and even it goes beyond protests too. I mean, even when we have events in the city, and you don't have to look too far past, the problems that occurred at the PNE last year, the Stanley Cup riots. The vast majority of people that were arrested and charged in those incidents were not from the city of Vancouver, but surrounding municipalities. So conversations about the sharing of policing costs would be, I think, very important. But that's all the questions I have. Thanks.
And that's something we can look at over this period as well, as we prepare the budget.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrice, and thanks, Councillor Montague. Next on the queue, Councillor Dominato.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the team for the update. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, I want to circle back to the historical slide. I think it was slide 15 that you had around property tax rates over time. And I'm just curious if you could expand a little bit on the historical property taxes going back, to 2016, and the difference we're seeing today, and sort of what, aside from inflation, what else was going on that the city was able to hold property taxes at such a low rate at 2.3%, 3.9%.
Yeah, I think, and I'm just bringing the slide up so we can see it. There we go. So I think that just to highlight a few factors, and so one is, again, just the inflation environment, as I said. So going back to some of the left-hand side of the chart, the sort of 2016, 17, 18 period, that would be a period of time where our collective agreements would be in the 2% range. And so, again, on the collective agreements that we have signed, we're seeing, like something double that range, and then that's consistent with the other areas in the region, and so there's a significant increase there. Another key factor is that that 1% additional property tax for infrastructure. So that was something that was put in place starting around that 2019 period, and that again is carried through each year, and so that's a factor that increases. And I don't know, Patrice, do you want to?
Maybe a couple of other things I can add. We did have the Vancouver Services Review through that period leading up to 2016. I think it was from 2010 to 2016. And so that was kind of a modernization. We looked at a lot of our cost structures, et cetera. Organizations held vacancies, including the police at that time. And then the other piece is we looked at our cost structure in many ways, and we reviewed a lot of our fees, and we did make a significant change to work towards cost recovery for our fees during that period. So that put some relief on the property tax as well. So it was a combination of many things. And again, I think the cost recovery piece is something we'll look at for our fees over this next few months and bring that to council also for their review.
Okay, thanks. That's actually a great segue. I'll have to come on for other questions, but I wanted to actually drill down into the revenue generation. So Councillor Joe asked about fees, but in there you've identified naming rights, sponsorship, donations. In terms of what that might look like, it takes time for those things to be put in place. So what is the time frame to see potentially new revenue from sponsorship or naming rights?
Maybe I can just highlight on Appendix C of the report, those revenue generating opportunities. Those are ones that we've looked at sort of in the short term. The numbers there are really what are the opportunities that we could be looking at for 2024. So from 15 to 23 million, that's sort of 1.5% to 2%. To the extent that it's a property tax, and we'll come back to you with more details. So there is, things that are that staff believe can be implemented within the short term, but certainly sponsorships is something that I think we can make some progress on as well, and definitely deliver some of that for 2023. But the naming rights and some of those others, I think they take time to work through both policies, but also engage the public in that exercise. So we may not see those until later years. So we just aren't far enough along in the project to be able to nail a number or an estimate for 2024, but that will definitely be part of the budget process.
Okay, thank you. We were recently at FCM, met with a number of municipalities there. What can you tell us about how other jurisdictions are faring that are of similar size in terms of property tax pressures and impacts on infrastructure and the ability to pay and support infrastructure?
Yeah. I would say most cities are following a similar trend that we are following. After the financial crisis in 2009, most cities were very focused on their costs. And then again, through the pandemic, and different cities impacted differently through the pandemic. So I think they are seeing sort of the similar, and of course, inflation impacts everything. And all municipalities have the same collective bargaining processes as well. So we're not alone. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll come back on for questions after. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Councillor Dominato. I've added myself to the queue with a couple of questions. First off, the $50 to $75 million for contingencies. That's generally just for collective agreements. What's the percentage?
So that is, it looks at inflationary pressures, which could include collective agreements, but also like non-salary related inflationary items. And so again, that's based on the estimates that we have around what we expect those collective agreements to settle at, as well as what we're seeing on some of those material cost increases. And so that at a high level we outlined, but I think we could provide more detail. Again, some of that would be provided to council in an in-camera update, given sensitivities around collective agreements in progress.
Sure, I'm curious, more like the emergency fund for in the event of some kind of unforeseen climate disaster or similar.
I think for the projections on the expense side, again, that is primarily take into account those known cost increases. We have the item from 2025 on at 0.5% for reserve replenishment, and so that reserve replenishment item would support rebuilding our reserves for that type of situation.
Okay. I'd like to look over some of the Appendix C items, and you'll forgive the pun. I want to get a little bit more granular on the sand project. So that's the sponsorship, advertising, naming rights, and donations. Who's leading that, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like generally we can provide council. It's probably more suitable to provide a more thorough update and have some of the staff involved providing an update on that. I don't know, Patrice, did you want to add?
It is, it's led by our business planning and project support BPPS group. It is citywide. It includes, engineering, parks, across the city. So we're really looking at all those opportunities. It is an area where there are existing policies, and so it's partly determining how those could change, what new policies we need, but also really looking at the different opportunities. So it will take a little bit of time to get through that, but we do expect to have that for this budget process. We are leveraging work that was done a number of years ago, so we do have some good baselines to work with.
And are we engaging with sort of outside partners like, say, Destination Vancouver in the conversation around this?
Are we when?
Engaging with outside partners like Destination Vancouver?
I'm not sure if we have at this point, but I assume that will be part of the process going forward.
Okay.
And I will check. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The ride-hail revenue that's articulated here at $5.9 million, that's for curbside management. That's not insignificant. Can you add a little color to what that looks like?
Does anybody have any? We might have to get back to you with some specifics. You could probably have engineering send a memo out to council on what they're thinking. Yeah, on all of these, as Colin says, there's a lot, maybe more to talk about with council on each of those, but it was just to give an indication. But as far as the policy pieces, we can give you more information.
Okay. And similarly then on the residential parking permit fees at $200,000, I seem to recall when we were having the conversation about citywide residential parking permit, we were talking as much as $80 million a year in revenue.
Yeah, I think this would be just using sort of our current process, but just maybe incrementing rather than the tradition built into the current revenue assumptions is that 3 to 5%. So this is just ramping that up by a few percent. Something more major would happen in the out years, in the later years. Yeah.
Is that a potential consideration for revisiting the idea of citywide parking permit fees?
So the engineering would need to come back with sort of a strategy for council at some point. This is just the incremental for 2024.
Yeah, but we're not at this stage, subject to direction from council, contemplating citywide permit parking. That's not what's in scope at this stage. And again, we can provide, but just to clarify that particular question.
Okay.
It's not what's assumed here.
Appreciate that clarification. That's it for me. Back on round two with Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thanks, Chair. I have a few questions and maybe a couple of examples to sort of make this real about some of the potential changes or opportunities. For example, with the park board, the last park board had imposed a moratorium on private events in parks. And we heard a story yesterday, I've heard it many times before, but all of council met with Destination Vancouver and heard a story about from the head of a destination management company who had a group in town, a meeting, conference. They wanted to hold an event, sort of dinner picnic in a park, and they weren't able to. And they literally were driving tens of thousands of dollars in permit fees, spending the local economy over the bridge to the North Shore where they held their event at the shipyards. They weren't able to do that. Now the new park board has lifted that moratorium. So have we recast some of the revenue around things like permit fees and expected events coming back in parks as part of the outlook at this point?
So maybe just to highlight in the bottom of the Appendix C is the Park Board does have the Think Big strategy, and that is very focused on revenue and enabling more of those items. We haven't built in a lot of that here because they're still working on it.
I guess the question, just to clarify, is
Specific
that
to the change in the events, I don't think anything is built in to this state, but we will look at that as we come back in with the
So
budget.
just to clarify, the Think Big, I think, was intended to be new and additional, but we would have baseline revenue from having allowed those events in past years that could be
As part of
factored
an
into the
estimate, you
outlook,
mean?
but are not at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on, the other thing is, with respects to the infrastructure deficit, because we've had past councils that have woefully underinvested because we picked up the slack on senior government investment, as you noted. And I know we've started getting quantification on that in response to a motion I brought forward. There's $250 million conservatively in there and other items. How significant is it that we are able to pull back now on things like the province investing in childcare so that we're not doing things like operating grants, or we can just be enabling housing through faster, better permitting or provision of land or locations for childcare, but we're not having to pick up on the childcare and the other piece? Because I guess my 2-point question is, we've got a 1% infrastructure renewal deficit, which is not going to get us where we need to go because we have $500 million in a deficit every year. And the last council also chose to deplete the reserves quite consistently. So how much of a strain is that? And also adding back reserves as well as dealing with aging infrastructure because we didn't.
You're looking for a dollar value?
Yeah, I'm
your
looking for
question?
sort of how significant the opportunity to pull back and have the province pick up what they need to, and versus us being able to actually deliver the services that we need to.
Okay. So I think there was a slide in the presentation, but I'll just highlight, we have been advocating to senior government for a different model for municipal funding. So instead of the city using our, in the municipal toolkit, invest, advocate, and regulate, instead of using our funds for childcare and housing, that we regulate through what council has been doing to build more affordable housing and rental housing, knowing that then that doesn't give us enough money to fund the things that we need to fund. So advocating for the province and the feds to provide that funding
Thank
to
you. I'm going to
municipalities.
keep going, so I'm just going to try to keep these answers tight short. So
Yeah.
we're in a pretty big hole, is what I'm hearing. There was a philosophy last term from council to keep digging into the reserves and kind of going to the well. And just want to hear clearly and quickly from staff that are we advocating that we not do that moving forward because we actually need to build up that reserve fund and we need the resiliency?
That's right, and reserve should only be for one time. It shouldn't be funding ongoing work as well. So yes, reserve should be contingency only.
Great. The other question I had is that the Auditor General recently, and I wonder if this is an example of where we could see an impact in terms of right-sizing the fees in the 2024 budget, because the recent Auditor General found that we had left $12.6 million on the table. That, by my count, is about 1.5%. Rounding off in property tax alone that we had to take from reserves because we were undercharging for cost recovery on issuing permits for housing. And so will we be able to realize some of those savings and right-size those fees in time for the 2024 budget?
Yes, that will be council's decision. In the past 2 years, we brought forward a report that highlighted the deficit, and the decision was to maintain fees at a lower level than cost recovery, with the intent that all the work that's happening around the permitting process would, enable us to go to get revenue through at a lower cost, so that we would bring that gap together over time.
I thought our philosophy had always been cost
Council, we'll
recovery.
bring that back to you with new information so you can get a sense of where we are on that journey.
Has our philosophy or our practice not always been cost recovery?
It's always been cost recovery is for permits. And we did, I think a number of years ago, we did a full review to make sure that we were doing full cost recovery. So we've been updating that over the last several years, and it's just in the last 2 years that the council decided to not increase the fees to fully recover the costs.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, it looks like Councillor Kirby-Young not only took the question right off the bat around the fire service, but also I was going to ask about cost recovery of fees. So thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. I'm going to ask to have a continued answer to the question I left with you, which was in seeing that if we, I guess the risks if we don't invest in sufficiently in things that could have mounting costs in the future, and what assessments are we doing around where the biggest risks are?
Mhm.
And you mentioned one, but I'm thinking climate wasn't one you mentioned, and we just had an announcement. So where is staff at in terms of assessing, I guess, the data around climate and the potential for more extreme weather events in Vancouver, including things like sea level rise, which I did mention in my previous question.
Yeah, that's a very good question also. So I would say we have done more work around the Climate Emergency Action Plan, which is mitigation. And as you know, we've been able to kind of tie financial strategy to the climate strategy and quantify those risks. On the adaptation side, we've not quantified those risks as much, and we are working on that as part of the climate adaptation strategy to start to put those financial numbers to it and a financial strategy, which would need to include senior government funding.
Yes.
So that is in progress.
Okay. Okay, that's good. I'm looking forward to hearing responses back around making sure that we're being as prudent as possible. I know that it's hard to put money in reserves when there's so many exigencies to spend the money on, but
And I'll just add, we are making those, we're not waiting for just that report. People are making those decisions all the time and incorporating it into their capital plans, like the green-gray infrastructure work that engineering is doing. So that's very much driven by changing climate and understanding, of course, how to respond to that changing climate and do it in a more cost-effective way than just sewer separation, but actually focusing on capturing the rainwater, et cetera. So people are doing that across the organization, factoring it in. But as far as the overall big strategy like sea level rise and the implications, we still have work to do.
okay, I look forward to report backs on that. Parking revenues. We've always been looking at sort of historic parking revenues and wanting to get back to historic levels. Are we at all considering that we may never be returning to historic levels if we actually achieve other city objectives like complete neighborhoods, like switching and increasing people's habits to more, walking, cycling, transit use rather than car use?
Yeah, I think Lon Leclerc would be the best one to answer that, but you're correct. I think in some areas where we're giving up parking space to have more investment in public realm and public spaces, then obviously that revenue comes down. I think though, as the city grows, opportunities for more paid parking across the city also grows. So I think there's still that opportunity to balance that, and they continue to look at that, as you know, and make sure that they're putting in paid parking where it makes sense, et cetera. So he could probably let you know, so how that balance works a little bit better than I could. But I think at this point, there's still opportunities as the city grows to increase parking, just maybe not in the same areas as we have been.
Okay, maybe increased parking, but anyway, I look
Increase parking fees, not necessarily
fee,
increase parking.
okay.
Yes, charge for parking versus free
All right,
parking.
that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it for my questions. Thank you very much, and for the reporting that you do to us. I think it's really fabulous that we get this information well in advance of the budget and have time to contemplate the various choices that we're going to have to make. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So I think most of my questions related to the business license fees have been asked by Councilor Kirby already, but I want to confirm. So Patrice, you said, you know, is that because council do not support a cost recovery model? So we intentionally keep the fees low?
No, a council policy and is cost recovery. That's what we have been working towards.
Yeah.
In the last 2 years, we made a number of investments in staffing and technology in order to improve the turnaround times for permits. And so those costs had incremental costs, which we didn't increase. So council chose not to increase the fees fully to cover those costs, because those investments should, over time, improve the productivity of the permitting process, right? So that so the fees will, the costs will come down, and then the fees don't have to go up as much. So that was a decision to make that short-term investment. Again, we'll come back this year and say how well is that balanced now? Is it closer than the number that Councillor Kirby-Young noted? And then you'll have that choice as to how we want to fund it this year.
I see. So we're gonna have a.
But our goal is cost recovery, yes, because otherwise it puts pressure on other funding sources like property tax. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's all my question, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And I just had one further question. In the context of, as you noted, municipalities are across the country and across the province are struggling with similar issues. There's been discussions both at UBCM and FCM about the inadequacy of the property tax system for the current 21st century city and the pressures that we're experiencing, whether it be related to climate, community safety, health issues, and also historic downloading. And so earlier we passed a motion around advocating around childcare, better childcare supports in terms of operating dollars, but we're also looking at a UCM resolution tomorrow around a renewed fiscal framework for municipal governments. Could you comment on what discussions you're having at this time with municipal officials, both provincially and federally, around a different framework for municipal governments, just given those increasing pressures and the fact that the property tax system isn't sufficient to meet those needs?
I can comment that at the Metro Vancouver table, both on the RFAC, which is the financial, the CFO group, and then at RAC, which is the CAOs, we have put together a number of recommendations on municipal finance reform, and are working through it through Metro Vancouver and as our community of municipalities. We have also at the provincial budget. We took that opportunity as a city to provide our feedback and also highlighted that as a need to change that structure around how municipalities are funded and support the growth of housing. And then certainly in the interactions, there's regular interactions, with the different ministries like housing, et cetera, that we are also, as where Vancouver is involved, we're highlighting that as well.
Thanks for that. Are you able to comment?
We don't have a formal, as a UBCM motion other than the resilience one that exists. And I know that the province and councillors are looking to try and advance that. But at this point, we haven't made any progress really towards those big changes through that motion.
In terms of some of those systemic changes, I was just curious if based on the discussions you're having with other municipalities, what are some tangible examples of like the recommendations you referenced that are being considered to the the provincial government? What does that look like? What are some of the things that could change? Or
well, as I said, probably the main one is to if cities provide more affordable housing and rental housing, and then we don't get the funding through CACs and DCLs to provide infrastructure to support that, that the province could fund in that way, fund more of the infrastructure, and cities regulate the housing is probably the biggest piece, because the City of Vancouver has led that. We know that we've increased a lot of rental, affordable housing, and we don't generate the revenue from there to cover amenities like parks, et cetera. So we are already in that situation, and so looking for the province to come to the table and help with that.
Right, and then as was noted in the resolution earlier, is that while we partner to enable childcare within the city, we're advocating to the province through UBCM this term for funding specifically to support ongoing operating maintenance, because that isn't coming with current dollars. Well, there's the $10 a day initiative underway. There isn't that additional funding to deal with the ongoing maintenance and
That's right.
operations
That
of
comes
those
out of city
childcare centers.
funding.
Okay, thanks. That's all my questions, Chair.
Okay, with no further, and thank you, staff, for answering all those questions. We have a motion on the floor from Councillor Kirby-Young, seconded by Councillor Carr, to receive this report for information. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that information passes unanimously. Thank you, staff, for attending today. Okay, now our next item, report number 5, authorization to negotiate a development agreement and ground lease with Fraser Academy Association at 2294 West 10th Avenue. It has been held to hear from registered speakers. Before we get there, though, I'm going to have to declare a personal conflict of interest, as my wife works for the firm that is doing the development planning for this project. So I'm going to ask Councillor Klassen, Deputy Mayor, to take the chair. You want to do it from here, Mike, or? I got the script right here. Thanks. We're right there.
All right, so we are now looking at Report 5, the authorization to negotiate development agreement and ground lease with Fraser Academy Association at 2294 West 10th Avenue. It has been held to hear from registered speakers. So first of all, does any member of council wish to declare conflict of interest on this item? Seeing none. We have staff from Real Estate, Environment and Facilities Management here to answer any questions council might have. Council, you have up to 5 minutes to ask questions for staff. Are there any questions? I see Councillor Boyle. Okay. I will advance you, Councillor. Are you?
Yes, thanks. I don't know if this is the time, but we no longer can ask questions of speakers. So I just was wondering what the conversation has looked like around access and affordability, given a pretty significant city grant in the form of a lease, what the public can expect in terms of ensuring that kids from families who might find the typical cost barrier, access for Vancouver families to these needed and important services.
Yeah, of course. So one of the prior two conditions of entering into the ground lease will be satisfaction with the public services requirement. ACCS is the department that's going to be leading those discussions, but there is going to be some earnest talks that are ongoing right now with how access can be expanded as best as possible, keeping in mind that this is a not-for-profit and it still needs to be economically viable to make this work. But absolutely, those are talks that are going on. I'm not privy to those in my capacity, but that will be a requirement that is to the satisfaction of the GM of ACCS and Real Estate, Environment and Facilities Management.
Okay, great. Glad to hear it. Thanks, Andrew. That's all for me, Chair.
Very good. Thanks very much, Councillor. Councillor Carr.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to be on the list.
Oh, you did not.
Sorry, no.
Okay. Clear the queue then. All right. So now we, seeing no other questions from council, we're going to move to hear from members of the public. Before I begin, I'd like to remind council members of the public that and the members of the public that in accordance with updates of the procedure bylaw that were enacted on May 10th council meeting, public speakers may only speak up to 3 minutes and council may not ask any questions of speakers. Public speakers should state whether they are in support of the opposition of the recommendations and may only speak once. I'll ask speakers if they are residents of the city of Vancouver, if it is not noted on the speakers list. where the speakers list is. Lots of here. Ah, very good. Thank you, clerk. All right, so our first speaker is Neil Johnson. Welcome, Neil. Got 3 minutes.
Good morning, Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. My name's Neil Johnston. I'm the CEO of Fraser Academy. I'm here with David Sachs, a board member of Fraser Academy as well and volunteer. We're delighted to live in a city that's committed to diversity, inclusion, and equity. People living with dyslexia are an important part of that conversation. We brought to Council 2 years ago a vision to bring to life a Centre for Dyslexia. Your support is foundational to that vision as it provides us land to have a home on. We've submitted to Council support a report recently, providing you an update with our progress towards that vision. When people with dyslexia are supported, they can thrive and contribute to Vancouver. When people are left unsupported, they are more vulnerable and at risk to homelessness, addiction, and mental health challenges. So it falls squarely in line with the City Council's commitments to the health and well-being of citizens in Vancouver and helping them to contribute to Vancouver life. I know you can't ask me any questions today, but I appreciate Councillor Boyle's question earlier. Regarding our school program, we're looking to put in place a new accessibility fund to augment that accessibility that we all know is so key to help families access our programming. We're working with ACCS to very much focus on public benefits, and our other services within the Centre for Dyslexia are offered at much lower cost or are donor funded, so we hope those to be free. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Neil. All right, so our next speaker is David Sachs. David.
Good morning, Council. Thank you for allowing me to be here. My name is David Sachs. I was born in Vancouver and I currently reside in Vancouver, actually in the same neighborhood close to where the Centre of Dyslexia hopefully will be. My family was impacted very positively. Both of my biological children went to Fraser Academy and one of my stepdaughters went there as well. I've stayed involved, I've stayed committed, and I currently consistently believe in the mission. And I echo what Neil said about what might have been the challenges and outcomes for my children and my offspring if they hadn't had the opportunity to be supported in their learning challenges. And I just want to add one thing, Councillor Boyle's point, the need to make this accessible exists now. It has for some time. I can tell you, having paid 2 tuitions at a time, it wasn't easy. But we made the sacrifices we need to make. And that accessibility fund is something they're already working on. I expect will be coming forward regardless and soon. So, by the way, just to be clear, I understood or thought that there would be questions, so I made myself available, but I don't want to take too much of your time. I just want to thank you for hopefully supporting us in our vision of helping this particular segment of the Vancouver community. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Okay, so this is the end of our speakers list for this item. Pardon me? Yep, Councillor Kirby-Young moved, second by Councillor Dominato. So any discussion, any questions or comments? Right. Councillor Carr.
All right. Thank you. This is a great report, and I think it's incredibly important. I just wanted you, Chair, to reiterate that Council's not asking questions because that is part of the new rules. I know you did to begin with, but I think one of the speakers didn't appreciate that we now cannot ask questions according to our new procedural rules. So I just wanted that on the record, and just to thank staff for working with the Academy. I think that, and I very much appreciate the attention being paid to increased access for people, families that might not have the wherewithal to pay the fees, and the great. So I think that is a fantastic move, and I think the outreach into the school communities and the teachers as well, to really increasing the breadth of information, knowledge, and support, both in identifying children who might be in need and directing them around opportunities to address those needs. It's excellent work. It's a real work around equity within our city, and so just want to thank the Fraser Academy very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Dominato.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to add a few comments with respect to this report. This has been a long time coming in terms of this leasehold. And I want to reflect how important the work of Fraser Academy is to the City of Vancouver, and not just the City of Vancouver and residents here and families, but to families across Metro Vancouver. When kids struggle with dyslexia or learning disabilities, there are significant implications if it's not dealt with in terms of the long term. It can play a critical role in terms of quality of life. It can contribute to poverty, to health issues, to mental health, substance use issues. I think what we need to recognize is how important the range and spectrum of educational institutions are to our city, and that Fraser Academy plays a key role in prevention and early intervention for young people. And as you spoke about your personal experience and lived experience of being a parent, and we know that. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity for a Center for Dyslexia. I am thrilled about the fact that Fraser Academy is continuing to work with the VSB as well and other schools to support and expand teacher training in this space, because again, we know that's an area that needs attention. A child is a child is a child, no matter what school they go to in the city. But Fraser Academy is contributing to our educational system through, and so I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you and appreciate the attention. Neil, you referenced the focus on a new accessibility fund and making the programs at Fraser Academy more accessible. I think that's incredibly important in terms of equity, and also that you're going to be doing more outreach with public schools as well as the public sector. So suffice to say, I'm supportive of the report. I think it's critically important for our young people, and thank you for your work, and thank you to staff as well for working with Fraser Academy to get to this place today.
Thank you, Councillor Dominato. Councillor Kirby-Yung.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It really is a moment, and I do want to acknowledge that because it has been incredible amount of work, and it's been a passion project, and it still is for all the Fraser Academy and the entire community of parents, kids, and the broader community at whole behind it. We've had the opportunity as councillors over the past term to visit, and when you get to see the kind of the low ratio of teachers to kids and the kids that are blossoming, that basically this makes their futures. And if they don't have that, as Councillor Dominato mentioned, kids fall through the cracks. But what this does is unlock their potential. It's really, to me, this is a great use of city-owned land to enable this type of facility in the city run by a nonprofit. It is tricky, and I appreciate the comments with respects to providing additional access, but I was very impressed in the existing center about the amount of outreach that Fraser does, but in the broader vision for teacher training, for after school, for expanding, and that's what this is about. It's growing this project to expand the number of kids who need it and the families who need the support and that can be served. So I think the important thing I think really to note here is that this will be, it's my understanding, the only facility of its kind in the city of Vancouver. So if we did not have this, imagine where all those families and kids, they would either not have the option to have these services provided, or they will be traveling to different cities, literally. And I think that the vision here is to grow and build on what has been very successful, operating out of very tight quarters right now in a smaller building, and having this lease. It's actually generational, because we're talking about enabling this nominal lease for up to 100 years. That's a century. So you think of that in terms of generations, that's 4 generations on average of kids and families who are going to go through this facility, and their lives are going to be changed because of that. And I can't think of a better use for city land, and I'm incredibly grateful to the passion of the Fraser Academy team, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do here. And I hope that having the certainty behind this lease is puts the wind beneath your sails in terms of the fundraising efforts. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Yum. Okay, so we're going to call the vote. Just a reminder, any council member whose video is disabled, they will be marked absent for the vote pursuant to the section 1413 of the procedure bylaw. So I will bring up the voting queue. I can do my own here. And are we okay? So I did vote, yep. It's there, should be. It's not showing up. One moment. I go to vote assist and I go in. Oh, it's Councillor Fry. Ah, okay, hang on a second here. One moment, vote assist Councillor Klassen, there you go. Okay, there we go. That vote passes unanimously with Councillors Bly and Mayor Sim absent. Thank you very much. All the very best. I guess Councillor Fry will take the chair again.
Okay, we're back. So we have 14 bylaws on the agenda for enactment. Bylaw 1 must be voted on and enacted before we can vote on bylaw 2. And I recommend we vote on bylaws 1, 3, and 5 to 14 first, and then go back and vote on bylaws 2 and 4. We'll come back to this in a moment. Sorry, clerk, I got mine. Sorry, one sec, folks. Mixed up. All right. So council members who were not present for the meetings related to public hearing enactment bylaws must confirm that they have reviewed the proceedings of the meeting and if they wish to vote on the enactment. Bylaw 10 is from the public hearing of June 21st, 2022. Councillor Bly was absent for this item at the public hearing. Councillors Klassen, Meisner, Montague, Joe, and Mayor Sim were not on council at the time and will need to review the proceedings to be eligible to vote. Councillor Klassen, have you reviewed the proceedings and will you be voting on the amendment?
I have and I will.
Thank you. Councillor Meisner, have you reviewed proceedings and voting on the amendment? Councillor Joe. Okay, thank you. Councillors Bly, Montague, and Mayor Sim are all on leave of absence. Bylaw number 14 is from the public hearing of. Oh, apologies, Councillor Montague. I have you noted as a leave of absence. Appreciate you're still here.
I decided to show up.
Appreciate you're still here. Thanks. Bylaw 14 is from the public hearing of June 15th, 2023. Councillors Bly, Boyle, and Mayor Sim were absent for this item at public hearing. Councillor Boyle, have you reviewed the proceedings and will you be voting on the enactment?
I have and I will.
Thank you. Councillor Bly and Mayor Sim are on LOA. Would someone like to move the motion to adopt bylaws 1, 3, and 5 to 14? Moved by Councillor Dominato, seconded by, Councillor Carr. 1, 3, and 5 to 14. Councillor, is there, no, so yes, and all in favor? Opposed, seeing none, that carries unanimously. Would someone like to move the motion to adopt bylaw number 2? Sorry, bylaw number 2 is, sorry, were you moving that, Councillor Boyle? Moved by Boyle, seconded. Okay, so then moved by Dominato and seconded by Meisner. Great. Council, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say yay. Opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. With respect to bylaw 4, staff are requesting council to refer this bylaw to the council meeting following standing committee tomorrow to allow further revisions to the bylaw. City Manager, would you be able to comment on that at all?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, Council, we are making this recommendation to refer this particular bylaw to tomorrow. We have been advised of a question today regarding Section 7 of the bylaw that deals with the vacant new inventory. And on review of the language that we have drafted, it does appear that it can be interpreted in a way that we don't believe is the intent. And this is specifically around new units that are constructed and become vacant in future years. Right now, the way it's worded, it could be construed as precluding the application of the exemption to those new units into the future. We don't believe that's the intent. It was inadvertent in the drafting. So we would anticipate bringing forward a slight revision to the bylaw tomorrow just to clarify that piece. So this is nothing to do with retroactivity. This is about how the bylaw, that exemption would apply go forward. And I think with that, we believe the bylaw would reflect council's intent, better reflect council's intent with respect to that exemption. That's the rationale.
Great, thanks, City Manager. Can somebody move a motion to refer bylaw number 4 to the council meetings by Councillor Carr? This will be to the council meeting following standing committee on June 28th, seconded by Councillor Boyle. Council, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yay. Opposed say nay. Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. The list of approved bylaws can be found on the city's website. Moving on now to administrative motions. There are 2 administrative motions on the agenda today. Number 1 is approval of form of development at 8433 Ash Street, formerly 622 to 688 Southwest Marine Drive. Does any member wish to declare a conflict of interest on this motion? Seeing none, Councilor, are there any questions to staff? Seeing none, would somebody like to move the motion? Moved by Councillor Klassen, seconded by Councillor Joe. Council, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yay. Opposed say nay. Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Number 2 is the zoning and development bylaw amendments to facilitate Broadway plan implementation. Does any member wish to declare a conflict of interest on this motion? Seeing none. Sorry, Councillor Carr, moved by Councillor Carr, second by Councillor Joe. Are there any questions to staff? Or any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor say yay. Opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to notice of council members' motions. Are there notices of council member motions for the upcoming standing committee meetings? I would like to remind council that due to the amendment to the procedure bylaw, members' motions will be placed on standing committee agendas. And reminder to please state the title of the motion and the date of the standing committee meeting on which you intend to move the motion, and be sure to send the title via email to the city clerk. Councillor Boyle.
Yes, thanks. I have a member motion for Wednesday, July 12th, entitled, I think this is my longest title ever, sorry about that, ensuring a net increase in dignified supportive housing units by renewing leases or finding new sites for temporary modular housing while new supportive housing is built.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Seeing nobody else on the queue, we can move on to new business. We have 2 items of new business on the agenda today. Number 1 is requests for leave of absence as follows. Councillor Bly for civic business on September 12th to 14th, 2023, and Mayor Sim for personal reasons on July 4th, 2023 from 3 p.m. onward. Somebody would like to move that? Moved by Councillor Boyle, seconded by Councillor Klassen. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Number 2 is the UBCM hydro cost motion. We have a resolution from Councillor Carr to be submitted to UBCM's June 30th deadline. Councillor Carr, would you like to introduce the motion?
He did circulate to all of you this motion yesterday and has discussed it with staff. The motion is to actually provide for equitable BC Hydro pricing for missing middle housing, which I think is of interest to all of us. They have come up, BC Hydro has come up with a set of policy recommendations under something called the distribution energy policy. Option 3 of that is to provide a more equitable distribution of costs to the missing middle housing developments. He noted in the whereases is that currently it could cost anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 for a pad-mounted transformer to enable missing middle housing to be developed on a lot. But that's, but the cost can vary. What this particular option 3 of BC Hydro does is to equitably look at the costs of increasing or adding new connections to hydro or upgrading connections, as in with renovations, so that there would be a modest per unit or per dwelling unit charge. So it's really around equity and making it easier for the development of missing middle housing.
Great, thanks, Councillor Carr. Would somebody like to second the motion? Seconded by Councillor Boyle. Council, is there any discussion? Okay, calling the question. All those in favor say, my apologies. So sorry. Here goes.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to question through you to the mover. I understand that when you start increasing the number of units on a single lot, that you are impacted by hydro costs. So can you just perhaps just unpack a little bit about how this would help to address, how this motion would help to address some of those extra costs associated with the hydro connections?
The hydro connections right now, if you are doing an upgrade or developing more units on a lot, may, according to BC Hydro, require you to put in a whole new transformer. I don't know if any of you have had conversations with people who are doing this, but sometimes it's they're requiring a transformer upgrade, a new pole that would service a whole block. I have certainly talked to people that have actually it's stopped them from doing upgrades that would be energy upgrades in specific because of those increased costs. So instead, Hydro would develop through its option 3 a pricing system that looks at sort of overall upgrades, anticipating that there will be upgrades over time, both with new developments in missing middle housing and eventually with upgrades in terms of renovations in order to meet our climate objectives and if the province's climate objectives. So the cost would be greatly decreased, and what we would get is per specific project. Hydro will bear extra costs now, but over time will recoup as more and more developments and renovations happen. So this is, as I say, a way to enable certain projects now to proceed without bearing undue costs now, as opposed to later on somebody who does it gets it for very cheap because somebody else has done the work before them or paid the price before them. So it is an equity situation.
Okay, thanks very much. And just again, through you, Chair, I think some of the work on this particular issue is being dealt with by the city, but this is a UBCM motion, so we're talking about trying to take a more of a provincial lens on this, right?
Correct.
Okay, good. Thanks very much, Chair. That's my questions.
Great. And Councillor Dominato, before we get, the clerk reminds me that this is moved and seconded, so at this point, these are points of information.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. It's a point of information through you, Chair, to the mover of the motion. It's just to clarify that the motion is supporting, apparently there's 3 options being considered, and this one supports option 3, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that BC Hydro is currently proposing a variation of option 3. Is it in support of that
Yes,
variation?
yes. No, it's supporting BC Hydro's option 3. That's right.
Proposal. Okay, just because I noted that they have a slight variation on that, but just wanting to be clear that on that point. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Dominato. Okay, so all those in favor say yay. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. Council, are there any other items of new business? Seeing nobody on the queue, we can move on to inquiries and other matters. Council, are there any inquiries or other matters? Councillor Boyle.
Thanks. I just first wanted to say a big congratulations to everyone who's graduating around this week. I think we have some family members of our own team here graduating, and it's been a total joy to see grad photos shared all across social media over the last week. So a big congratulations to 2023 graduates. And then also wanted to ask a inquiry to the city manager, which I don't expect to have now, but happy to hear back on an update on the work that the city is doing around legacy businesses and cultural food assets, and when council can expect to hear back on that work.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I'll have to follow up with the team to get you that
No problem.
info.
Great, thank you.
Great. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks. I have one question through you, if I could, to the city manager, and it's about, I'm still hearing conversation chatter and looking for some clarity on the situation of the Chinatown Plaza, where some folks are advising that the city-owned Chinatown Plaza, the number of seniors were doing Tai Chi early in the morning, but security had asked them to leave and were escorted out, and VPD was called, and I wonder if we can get some perspective on that situation.
Yes, certainly, Councillor, I can convey my understanding of that. The use of the plaza by that group has been under discussion with Yarrow, the society, for some time, a number of weeks. I believe there had been previous conversations with them around the use of that space, and I believe they had used it previously, but it had been asked not to. Until such time as there could be some agreement on how it would be used. There's questions of liability and so on. They were present on that day. The staff at the Chinatown Plaza, I believe it was actually Easy Park staff, requested that they leave. There was unfortunately some controversy with the staff who were organizing the session, and they were reluctant to depart. There were actually multiple calls to the VPD. One was a tenant because the activity was interrupting access to their business. And then the other was one of the staff members involved, just given the level of, I think, contention with one of the staff members. So I understand that the VPD did attend and discuss the matter in kind of a low-key way. Obviously not how I think anybody would prefer that this matter be dealt with. I think, we have some concerns that the use of the space needs to be managed properly. And it was something that we had committed to do, but unfortunately the group came back without those arrangements in place. So it's still under discussion, and happy to update council kind of when we land that, but that's my understanding of what transpired there.
Okay, so just thank you. That's really helpful. And just back to follow up to that, just back through you, Chair. So we are open to providing that opportunity. We're just working through details, is what I'm hearing.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Like I say, there are some issues with the tenants in Chinatown Plaza with some concerns. So we need to ensure that all parties are kind of comfortable with how this is going to work.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I also want to mention that I think as everyone is aware of that the Chinese Canadian Museum will be open this weekend. It is the first Chinese Canadian museum in Canada. I think it's in North America as well. So, we all know Chinese Canadian made a huge contribution to our city, to our country overall. So I really encourage you participate in the opening ceremony and perhaps visit the museum after it opens. And also this year is the 100 years anniversary of the Chinese Exclusion Act, this enfranchisement. So I think it's a very iconic the milestones in the in history of Canada. So with that, I really encourage you to visit Chinese Canadian Museum. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Zhou. I have a little inquiry in other matter for the city manager. It's with some sadness we acknowledge that this is the almost 1-year anniversary since Augustin Beltrain was hit and killed at the intersection of Hornby and a marked bicycle crosswalk. And certainly this council have put forward a motion in the last term to explore truck guards, physical guards on trucks. I'm wondering if there's any further information that from our side on the safety issues around that particular intersection and what might come out of this tragedy.
Thanks, Councillor. Sorry, you're asking specifically about the design of that intersection.
And just from a city perspective, I know that there was a police report forthcoming. And
yeah, thanks. I'm happy to follow up with engineering and follow up with you on that.
Great, I appreciate that. And on a I suppose a happier note, we will be celebrating the 156th anniversary of Canada this July 1st, and just want to make a mention, as we won't be having a council meeting between now and Canada Day. Happy Canada Day, everybody. Okay. Seeing nobody else on the queue, folks, move to adjourn. Councillor Klassen, seconder. Councillor Meisner, all in favor? Yay, nay. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. This meeting is recessed until July. Oh, no, sorry. No, that's not. Nope. Sorry, but we will be meeting in camera at 1 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.